Breaking right now on Morning News Now, 11th hour deal this morning after more than 5 weeks of war and wavering on the brink of what the president threatened was an apocalyptic level military offensive. The U.S. and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. President Trump announcing the truce on social media last night, less than 2 hours before his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face the death of a, quote, whole civilization. That threat drawing international outrage. This morning, dozens of Democrats are calling for the president to be removed from office as Pakistani officials presented the White House with a 10-point peace plan from the Iranians. President Trump calling it a workable starting point. The sudden about-face sending oil prices plunging back down under $100 a barrel. We start this morning with what we know about the terms, where the negotiations go next, and if that ceasefire is actually holding. Good morning, and thanks for joining me. I'm Sam Brock, in for Joe in Savannah this morning. We have a team of analysts and correspondents standing by to break down the latest on this whirlwind ceasefire. But first, let's go straight to NBC's Alice Barr, who is in Washington for us this morning. Alice, good to see you. What a last 12 hours. President Trump here announcing the 2-week ceasefire deal about 90 minutes before that deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz and reach a deal to end the war or a, quote, whole civilization would die, he said. What do we know at this hour about the ceasefire and the president's optimism over whether it's going to actually hold?
Good morning, Sam. The key here, as it has been for weeks now, is the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump said the ceasefire is subject to the complete, immediate and safe opening of what we know is that vital energy route, and that assuming Iran follows through on reopening it, the U.S. will suspend bombing and attacking Iran for 2 weeks. He said the U.S. had already achieved its military objectives and that Iran had proposed a 10-point plan that was a workable basis for negotiations toward a final peace deal. That proposal includes seeking the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from all bases in the Middle East, and that controlled passage through the Strait of Hormuz would continue to be coordinated with Iran's armed forces. It's not clear how that will square with President Trump's demand for a complete reopening of the strait. Already, some major shipping companies have voiced doubts about restarting operations through there, and the president said the U.S. would be hanging around to be sure that everything goes well.
Right, Alice, you already mentioned several points that were considered non-starters for this administration, and yet here we are. This is potentially part of the ceasefire deal. Pakistan's prime minister, helping to broker the deal, has now invited leaders from the U.S. and from Iran to Islamabad this Friday to continue the peace talks. How's the White House responding to that?
Yeah, so the Pakistani prime minister said both the U.S. and Iran had displayed wisdom and understanding, and that he hopes the Islamabad talks, he's invited the two sides to attend this Friday, will achieve sustainable peace. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that, quote, President Trump and our powerful military got Iran to agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz and negotiations will continue. She said there are discussions about in-person talks, but that nothing is final until announced by the president or the White House.
All right, so we're standing by on that. Lastly, Alice, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also announcing on Tuesday that American journalist Shelley Kittleson had been freed in Iraq by a militia aligned with Iran's government. What more can you tell us about her kidnapping and this release?
So she is a freelance American journalist who was kidnapped a week ago near Baghdad by the Iran-backed Iraqi militia group Kataib Hezbollah. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio thanked the FBI, the Pentagon, and Iraqi partners for helping to secure her release. He said that this resolution, quote, reflects the Trump administration's steadfast commitment to the safety and security of American citizens, no matter where they are in the world, and that the State Department was relieved this American is now free and are working to support her safe departure from Iraq.
All right, Alice Barr getting us started from Washington this morning. Thank you so much. We move now to NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian, who joins us from London with more. Danielle, good to see you. Let's begin right away with the Iran's 10-point peace plan. Do we know what's in it? Because early reporting was it contained requests this administration would have considered absolutely non-starters. Now it's workable, according to the administration. How is Iran responding to the 2-week ceasefire?
Yeah, good morning, Sam. And Iran is reacting much like Donald Trump is and declaring victory. And perhaps this is a sign that this is indeed a workable plan where both sides can spin a win. All sides, of course, will have demands. What is in this 10-point plan that Donald Trump has described as a workable basis on which to negotiate? First things first, controlled passage through the Strait of Hormuz, coordinated with Iran's armed forces. Secondly, Iran says an end to the wars with militant groups in Yemen, Lebanon, and Iraq, what Iran calls the axis of resistance. The withdrawal of U.S. combat forces in the region, that's a big one. It's unclear how they're going to react to that. The full compensation of damages to Iran, what many will see as really unlikely, the lifting of sanctions on Iran, and the release of all frozen Iranian assets abroad. What's unclear, Sam, first of all, there are lots of questions here, but will Iran give up its enriched uranium or abandon its ballistic missile program? That's unclear. But I should point out that the Associated Press is reporting that the Farsi version of this plan did include the right to enrichment for Iran, something that was left out of the English version that was given to journalists.
Which, of course, was ostensibly the entire reason the administration began this invasion to begin with, right? Was to prevent Iran from developing nuclear capability. And you're saying sort of lost in translation between these two versions. So that's a huge point there. Do we know, Danielle, is the ceasefire holding?
There have been reported Iranian strikes across the Gulf region this morning. So though a ceasefire has been agreed, has it been enforced? It doesn't appear so. What's also unclear is the strait open? Are ships going through? That's unclear. And will Iran be charging a fee? Those are still questions up in the air. We did hear from one of the world's biggest shipping companies this morning, Maersk, who said the ceasefire may create transit opportunities, but does not yet provide full maritime certainty. And we do not yet understand the potential conditions attached. Sam, there was a collective sigh of relief, no doubt, around the world among leaders. Even the Pope has weighed in. Here in the UK, Keir Starmer will be traveling to the Gulf in the next few days. Worth noting, the Spanish Prime Minister posting on X earlier this morning. Now, the Spanish Prime Minister has been extremely critical of the U.S. and Israel throughout this war. He posted, "The government of Spain will not applaud those who set the world on fire just because they show up with a bucket." Now, I also want to point out that while much of the conversation today will be about geopolitics and the impact on the markets and the price of oil, it's also worth reflecting on the people of Iran here. Sure, there were some who were celebrating yesterday and who will continue to celebrate today, but many will be asking, what was all this for? Many of them took to the streets back in January and were met with brutal force by the regime. Some were arrested and some were executed in the past few days and weeks. And so now they find themselves with a regime that, despite what Donald Trump says, is much like the old one, but even more emboldened, and has proven that it has a very high threshold for pain.
Right. And the previous regime, by some reports, killed tens of thousands of people who were protesting. Danielle, I do want to ask one other thing here. Has Israel agreed to the ceasefire? And does the deal include Lebanon, where, of course, Israel is targeting the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah?
Yeah, this is adding another layer of complexity here. The Pakistan prime minister said that the ceasefire would include Lebanon. Israel said no, that it would continue fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israeli military, in fact, issuing yet another evacuation order for the southern Lebanese city of Tyre. Hundreds of thousands of people, as you know, have been forced to flee. A quick note, however, on the domestic side in Israel. Despite Donald Trump's enthusiasm here, we're not hearing the same tone by Benjamin Netanyahu in his office. He may not have wanted to go along with this, but he is going along with this. One opposition leader is describing this as a political disaster. For Israel, it has said over and over again what it considers an existential threat is the enriched uranium and the ballistic missile program. And we still don't know, as I said earlier, if that is going to be addressed in the negotiations.
Yeah, definitely still very much up in the air. Danielle, thank you so much for that report. We're now going to go to domestic politics here in the United States and bring in NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz, joining us from Washington with more on just these deluge of developments. Megan, good morning. So the ceasefire news yesterday was not enough to ease the concern of some members of Congress. We've learned that dozens of Democrats right now are calling for removing President Trump from office. Walk us through what they're saying even after this announcement.
Yeah, good morning, Sam. So more than 70 Democrats in Congress are now calling for the president to be removed from office, either through the vice president and the cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment in order to remove him, or by Congress voting to impeach and convict the president. Now, this is really the first time in President Trump's second term that we're seeing this groundswell of support from Democrats in Congress pushing for the president to ultimately be removed from office. And this comes even though Democrats have already obviously been very critical of the president's war on Iran. But this recent push yesterday comes in response to the president's remarks on Truth Social yesterday, where he threatened a whole civilization will die tonight. Now, that I do want to point you to what one senator in particular had to say, Senator Ed Markey. He wrote yesterday in a post that Congress must return from recess. He called for the president's impeachment and conviction, or for the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment in order for the president to be removed. He wrote, quote, "This is as grave a moment as the world has faced in the nuclear era." Now, Sam, even in the aftermath of the ceasefire, several Democrats still are saying that this is really too little too late, and that the president has already committed these offenses that they believe warrant the president to ultimately be removed from office. So I want to point you to what another member of Congress had to say. This is from Congressman Seth Moulton, who wrote, "Temporary ceasefire or not, Trump already committed an impeachable offense. Congress needs to get back to work and remove him from office before he does more damage to our country and the world." Now, obviously, in President Trump's first term, he was impeached twice. He was not convicted. If lawmakers ultimately try to move forward with a push to ultimately try to impeach him, Democrats would need some Republican support in order to get that over the finish line. And right now, there are Republicans who are critical of the president, but we have not heard any Republicans so far calling for the president's impeachment or removal.
Right. Well, that's the key question in all of this, right? I mean, there's pretty much been, Megyn, universal condemnation over the language that the president used, evoking this idea of wiping out a civilization. Most GOP leaders did not have too much to say following President Trump's early morning threat yesterday. Again, that a whole civilization will die if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened, hours before that ceasefire was announced. I guess the question here is, some Republicans are pushing back against the more extreme portions of this rhetoric, or what have we learned?
Yeah, so there's this growing faction of right-wing influencers, MAGA media personalities who have increasingly criticized the president's conduct with the war in Iran and the president's rhetoric in recent days as well. And so publicly, we've heard pushback from people who had previously been staunch allies of the president who are now criticizing him. People like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, with Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene even yesterday calling for the president to be removed from office with the 25th Amendment. But, Sam, I really think that this goes to point to what this growing faction of MAGA, part of what had been the president's base, is starting to feel like they're betrayed by the president, because they're pointing to the president during his campaign, saying that he was going to end wars, he was going to be a peace president, and they're saying, hey, this isn't what we voted for. And so we're starting to see this discontent in that part of what had been the MAGA world sort of starting to bubble up in recent days. So it'll be interesting to watch how that continues now that the ceasefire has been announced. But, you know, taking a step back here as well in terms of what the public really thinks about this war in Iran, polling has indicated that the public has, a majority of the public disapproves of strikes in Iran as well. Obviously, polling is just a snapshot in time, and we don't yet know how the public is going to be reacting polling-wise to the ceasefire announcement. But, you know, big picture here, this is all happening during a midterm election year. And over the next few months, as lawmakers are going to campaign, they're going to be facing questions about what they think about the president's conduct and the president's actions with regards to Iran, Sam.
That's a great point. I mean, they're going to be on the record about their reactions to this. And I'm wondering also, are there other GOP lawmakers? I mean, you sort of talked, Megyn, about like the conservative media ecosystem and the reaction there. But what about like the Lisa Murkowskis and Ron Johnsons of the world? What have they said about the threats to destroy civilian infrastructure?
Yes, there is some pushback from some members of Congress as well. People like Lisa Murkowski, who were saying that the president's language should not be excused. But Congress right now is on recess. They are back in their districts and they're back in their home states. And so they're really not being asked in the halls of Congress right now for their reaction by reporters, something that typically we would be able to hear a lot directly from members of Congress right away in the halls of the Capitol for their reaction to this. But it's certainly something that lawmakers are going going to be pressed about, likely in their home districts, and then when they return from recess as well, in terms of what they think about the president's rhetoric recently and whether they would ultimately potentially be on board with any of these Democrats' push for an impeachment and conviction of the president, which, like we discussed earlier, would ultimately need some Republican support in order to move forward. And right now, Republicans, even though Republicans have been, in some cases, critical of the president's rhetoric, have not said yet that they want the president to be impeached or convicted, Sam.
Megan, real quickly, while we have you, we've seen the oil markets react in real time to this more than month-long conflict in Iran that's led to the highest gas prices we've seen here in years. The market's responding in a big way, it looks like, after the ceasefire was announced. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. So the prices of oil dropped and stock futures rose in the aftermath of the president's ceasefire announcement. So in terms of the price of oil, the price of U.S. crude oil dropped more than 15% to about $95 a barrel. Now, just to give you some context here, yesterday, there was a point at which it was trading at $117 a barrel. So pretty significant drop there. Stock futures also rising yesterday. For example, S&P 500 futures rising more than 2.7%. Dow futures up about 2.5% last night. And remember, this comes, oil and gas prices had been rising when the Strait of Hormuz was closed, because this is a major shipping route that usually about a fifth of the world's oil would pass through. And, that had been closed to most ships throughout the course of the war so far. So, I think a couple of big questions remain. One, how quickly does the strait reopen? And ultimately, how quickly would that drive down the cost of gas and oil prices further? Because it could ultimately take some time for shipping to resume as normal and for that to ultimately, those ripple effects to be seen through the economy. Now, remember as well, here in the U.S., gas prices have risen a lot since the start of the war. Yesterday, they were at an average of about $14.14 a gallon. And so questions about, how quickly are we ultimately going to see those prices come down in the aftermath of the ceasefire announcement? But the market's certainly seeming optimistic right now, Sam.
Yeah, it's been some dramatic swings for sure. Megan Leibowitz, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Let's get more analysis now with Joel Rubin. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and author of the Briefing Book on Substack. Joel, good morning. Great to have you. Thank you for doing this. It's hard to conceive what's just transpired, right? In the space of one day, President Trump went from saying that an entire civilization was going to die to announcing now this 2-week ceasefire last night. What changed for the president? Was he desperately looking for an off-ramp, or does this feel like meaningful developments?
Well, Sam, it's great to be with you. And yeah, without a doubt, there's a helter-skelter nature to what we've just experienced. But, look, ultimately, when wars start, they're a sign of diplomatic failure. And now here we are back again at diplomacy. And so I think for the president and his team, they saw a window coming out of Iran. It looks like that deadline did have an impact on the thinking of the new supreme leader to at least get a pause and get some kind of ceasefire to see if diplomacy can be restarted. But make no mistake, this was a devastating war for Iran. We also in the United States did not achieve the goal of regime change, which I think the president realized early on was not viable without a land invasion. And so we're back to diplomacy and talking just as we were about 6 weeks ago.
Well, regime change, but also Iran's capability of continuing highly enriched uranium and potential nuclear capabilities. I mean, that was, at least according to the president, a big reason behind this invasion. So if that's part of their 10-point plan, Iran, that they can continue to enrich uranium, is that workable? I mean, that's sort of the language that the administration was using. But based on what's been released by Iran so far, some of the points had been previously rejected by the U.S. Do you think, Joel, that both sides are likely to reach an agreement, given what the context of this all is in these upcoming talks brokered by Pakistan?
Well, look, the terms that both sides are proposing have barely any overlap between them. They're maximalist demands coming out of Iran. Certainly the idea that now the United States would withdraw from the region. If anything, our regional allies are looking more to the United States today than they were 6 weeks ago for defense after being on the receiving end of Iranian missiles. So I'm not an optimist about these diplomatic talks. And look, the Middle East is littered with failed ceasefires over many, many decades between many warring parties. This ceasefire is one in a long line of temporary truces. And so we may very well be back at it. These parties have very different views of what needs to take place going forward. But I do want to add on the enriched uranium, while it may still very well be inside of Iran, the capacity to re-enrich that infrastructure was severely damaged in these strikes. And so I think we're going to hear a lot of that coming from the White House as well.
All right, that's a good point. I would also add, Joel, that the war has seen, obviously, thousands of people killed at this point.
That's right.
The destruction of critical infrastructure, as you just mentioned, and a surge in oil prices that has threatened the global economy with all the trickle-down effects there. On top of that, it's strained relations with many of our traditional allies in Europe, NATO. A lot of people are going to be asking in the aftermath of this, assuming there actually is a deal, is the U.S. better off than it was before? And was it all worth it? How do you respond to those questions?
Yeah, look, Sam, the military execution of our war plan that we saw over the past 4 to 6 weeks had many successes, but without a strong political and diplomatic structure behind it, without a real strategy that benefits from such military operations, you really come out looking bad. And I think that's where we are right now, where we did not have the kind of political and diplomatic program that could help us to leverage this war for better relations. And certainly with NATO now, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, is going to be in Washington today. There are a lot of tensions. And so we mismanaged this on the political and diplomatic level without a doubt. And I think the countries around the world are going to be increasingly demanding of the United States more answers before military action takes place. So not much better off on those levels. And ultimately, that's the world we live in. We are not in a constant state of war. We need to engage and deal with our allies effectively. We need to have political visions that the American people support. And right now, clearly, as you're discussing with your colleagues, that's not the case.
Right. And it's pretty clear there's no appetite for a constant state of war.
That's right.
To use your words. Joel, real quickly, there's another wrinkle to all of this. Pakistan says the ceasefire includes Israel's invasion of Lebanon. Israel disputes that, right? So the end of attacks on Lebanon is one of Iran's demands in that 10-point plan. So could Israel's refusal to halt hostilities on Lebanon and specifically Hezbollah and withdraw its troops threaten peace prospects between the United States and Iran?
The complexities of the Middle East, right? I mean, just as you think you got one conflict solved, another one rears its head. Look, I think that this is going to require Iran and the United States to engage. Hezbollah launched strikes into Israel, remember, several weeks ago, or early on in the action, and that's why Israel invaded. Now Israel is in deep in Lebanon. So I think that's going to have to be part of these negotiations, but there will need to be some pullback by both the Israelis and Hezbollah to calm that down if there's going to be a chance for negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in the coming days.
Joel Rubin, we really appreciate your insight this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.
We move now to Northern California and the latest on a shooting involving ICE agents that's under federal investigation this morning. Video shows officers opening fire on a car as the driver accelerates toward them. ICE says it happened yesterday during, quote, a targeted traffic stop as agents moved in to arrest a suspected gang member they say was wanted for murder. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has the full story.
Dramatic new video of an ICE shooting in California east of the Bay Area. You see multiple SUVs and trucks pulled over, flashers on. At least 3 officers outside that black car, which suddenly backs up. Then the car turns and speeds forward. Officers, guns drawn, appearing to move out of the way. Zooming in, at least 1 officer appears to fire. The car speeds to the left over the median. The video, which has no sound, ends there and doesn't show what led up to the driver taking off. ICE saying in a statement officers were conducting a targeted vehicle stop to arrest Carlos Ivan Mendoza Hernandez, an 18th Street gang member wanted in El Salvador for questioning in connection to a murder, and that he weaponized his vehicle in an attempt to run an officer over, adding our officers fired defensive shots. They say Hernandez was taken to a hospital, his condition unknown. The FBI is now investigating. It comes as the city of Minneapolis releases this new video of another ICE shooting back in January, which contradicts the Trump administration's original account. DHS previously said an officer shot and wounded a Venezuelan man during an immigration enforcement operation after he and another man attacked the officer with a shovel and broom. But the new video shows one man appearing to drop a shovel as another runs toward a house empty-handed. A third person, believed to be the officer, tackles him. 2 unnamed ICE officers were suspended in February, with the agency saying in a scathing statement they appeared to have made untruthful statements, adding they could face potential criminal prosecution. Maggie Vespa, NBC News.
All right, Maggie, thank you. It might technically be spring, but at least here in New York, it is not feeling like that very much outside this morning. There are freeze warnings in effect from the Ohio Valley to the Northeast. We got all the details for you right now with your Morning News Now weather and meteorologist Angie Lastman. I got a little excited when I saw some warmer numbers in there, but it turns out it's not for the Northeast.
Yeah, I hope no one put away their winter coats across this region because, Sam, I pulled mine out and wore it this morning because temperatures are quite chilly. Notice we've got these freeze alerts up. We've got freeze warnings across parts of the mid-Atlantic stretching back as far west as Indiana. Notice Indianapolis, Columbus, Charleston, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York all included in those as our temperatures sit well below normal for this time of year. We do have some locations that are approaching record lows at this hour as well, so we'll wait and see how that kind of shapes up. But notice Pittsburgh right there at the mid-20s, feeling like 25, feeling like 22 degrees in New York City this morning, 22 for the wind chill in Detroit. And this is really going to set the stage for what we deal with even into the afternoon hours today, which is below normal temperatures. We'll get a little bit of warming going, but not a whole lot. We still end up below that typical mark for this time of year. 59 for Roanoke, 60s in Charleston. Not terrible the farther south you go, but really all the warmth is confined essentially across parts of the Midwest in the Central Plains and stretching out west. That's where you see the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. But the good news is much of that warmth is going to start to work its way to the east here as we get into tomorrow. So still a couple of us on the low end of things for this time of year. But notice there's some 80s out there. Wichita, Paducah, even Boston will top out right at 54. That's a typical temperature for this time of year. And we only get warmer beyond that. Notice Washington, D.C. on Friday, 75 degrees. That's going to feel great for some folks looking for some warmth. We've got upper 70s in Asheville, in Evansville, in Wichita, and even Chicago. You go from those mid 50s on Friday to the low 60s on Saturday, and by Sunday, upper 70s. So it's not all bad news is the moral of the story here, Sam. We are going to see some temperatures kind of moderating out, and they'll deliver. We'll finally get maybe them to stick around beyond that. But in the meantime, the jackets are necessary this morning.
I'm hesitant to say it feels like the end of winter, but it kind of feels
right.
like
you don't want to
to
tempt Mother Nature. If I know one thing, it's that.
Been burned by that before. Thank you so much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.